This Pontiac was so dominant, General Motors had to kill it. In early 1963, Pontiac engineers drilled about 120 holes through the steel frame of a brand new Catalina, swapped every body panel they could for aluminum, and built a 421 V8, making close to 500 horsepower. Then they gave the finished cars away for free to drag racers, and before the season even started, GM killed the whole program. This is the 1963 Pontiac Catalina 421 Super Duty, the car they call the Swiss cheese, and its story is one of the wildest things to come out of Detroit. Pontiac's problem. Now, to understand why Pontiac went this far, you just need to know one thing about where they stood heading into 1963. For the previous few years, Pontiac had been the dominant force in NHRA superstock drag racing, largely thanks to a group of engineers who had been more or less ignoring the 1957 AMA Gentleman's Agreement that was supposed to keep factories out of competition. But by the summer of 1962, the advantage was slipping. Ford, Chrysler, and Chevrolet were all showing up with bigger engines and lighter cars, and the math in drag racing is pretty straightforward. Engineers at the time figured every 100 pounds you could shed was worth about a tenth of a second in elapsed time. Pontiac needed something extreme. So, who was behind all of this? The man running Pontiac's engine program was Malcolm Mac McKellar, an engineer who had been with the division for years under the leadership of Pete Estes and John DeLorean. McKellar was the kind of guy whose camshafts were literally named after him, the McKellar number 7, the number 10, and others. And his mechanical number 10 cam was the same grind that went into the 421 cubic inch V8 that Fireball Roberts used to win the 1962 Daytona 500. If you ask me, when a company starts naming engine parts after the engineer who designed them, that tells you everything about how much freedom and respect that team had inside the building. McKellar wasn't just tuning engines, he was effectively Pontiac's secret weapon, and his fingerprints were all over the Swiss cheese program from the very start. The heart of the car was a 421 cubic inch Super Duty V8, that's 6.9 liters, topped with twin Carter AFB 4-barrel carburetors sitting on a special aluminum intake manifold. McKellar and his team fitted it with Mickey Thompson forged aluminum pistons that pushed the compression ratio up to 12.5:1, reworked the cylinder heads with taller intake ports, oval-shaped exhaust ports, and larger valves, 202 inches on the intake side and 176 inches on the exhaust. On paper, Pontiac rated the engine at somewhere between 405 and 410 horsepower, depending on which document you look at. In reality, these motors were putting down closer to 500 on the dyno, and Pontiac knew it. They just had every reason in the world not to advertise that number. But the engine was only half the story. What made this car truly something else was the weight savings. And this is where things got a little crazy. Pontiac's engineers started by cutting the top section off the boxed frame rails, leaving just a U-shaped channel. They also deleted the front sway bar entirely, since the car would never need to handle a corner, only a straight quarter mile. Then they drilled approximately 120 holes through what was left of the rail walls, pulling out as much metal as they could while keeping just barely enough structure for the car to survive a pass. And I do mean barely. The frames were so flimsy that assembly line workers had to prop them up with heavy wooden timbers just to keep them from twisting or folding before the body went on. The journalist Roger Huntington was the first to describe these cars in print. He counted the holes when he inspected Royal Pontiac's Catalina, the one driven by Jim Wangers, and wrote about them in the May 1963 issue of High Performance Cars magazine. He called them Swiss cheese, and the name stuck for good. Now, the drilled frame was only the start of the diet. Pontiac replaced steel with aluminum on the front fenders, hood, inner fender wells, radiator core support, bumpers, and bumper brackets. The exhaust manifolds, bell housing, and rear axle center section were all specially cast in aluminum too. And here's a detail that Pontiac guys love to bring up. Those aluminum exhaust manifolds had a tendency to actually melt if they got hot enough, which on a car making close to 500 horsepower at full throttle, they absolutely did. So that was a nice bonus feature on your factory race car. Beyond the aluminum, they stripped out everything that wasn't specifically required by NHRA rules. Soundproofing, body sealers, heater, radio, all gone. Side windows were swapped for plexiglass. The battery got relocated to the trunk for weight distribution. And since the rulebook said the car needed an exhaust system but never said how many, Pontiac ran a single exhaust pipe instead of dual. Because why carry extra iron down a quarter mile when the rulebook doesn't make you? There's one more trick worth mentioning. To qualify for NHRA Superstock classes, these cars had to be assembled on the regular production line alongside normal Catalinas. So Pontiac built them with basic 389 two-barrel engines and 3-speed manual transmissions. Then, after each car rolled off the line but before it shipped, Pontiac Engineering pulled that drivetrain and installed the full 421 Super Duty engine. Technically still a production car, just with a very creative definition of what production meant. All told, the finished Swiss cheese Catalina tipped the scales at roughly 3,300 pounds, about 400 pounds lighter than a stock Catalina. On the strip, that translated to 12-second quarter miles at around 120 miles per hour, which for a full-size car in 1963 was absolutely wild. Now, these were not cars you could walk into a Pontiac dealership and buy. Every one of the 14 Swiss cheese Catalinas was painted fire frost silver, with blue interior trim. No options, no color choices, and they were given, not sold, to carefully selected drag racing teams. We're talking about guys like Mickey Thompson, Arnie the Farmer Beswick, and Jim Wangers, who ran the program out of Royal Pontiac in Michigan. And the results were immediate. The Wangers car won its class at the NHRA US Nationals and finished as the runner-up for Little Eliminator, which at the time was about as big as drag racing got. But those results only lasted a matter of weeks. In late January 1963, the exact date depends on your source. Mac's Motor City Garage says January 21st. Other sources, including Sports Car Market, put it at January 24th. GM Chairman Frederick Donner and President John F. Gordon issued what Pontiac people still call the Edict. Every GM division was ordered to withdraw from all racing activities effective immediately. No wind-down period, no finishing out the season. And the reason had almost nothing to do with the cars themselves. General Motors at the time controlled close to 50% of the entire American automobile market. Ford and Chrysler had already abandoned the 1957 AMA agreement and were spending heavily on factory racing. But GM's executives were terrified that the Justice Department would use the company's dominance and its very public racing wins as evidence to break the corporation apart on antitrust grounds. So GM killed its fastest car not because anyone had actually complained about it, but because the company was simply too big and too dominant to be seen winning. Mac McKellar later recalled that the order was about as blunt as it gets. All development and support stopped immediately, and anyone caught violating the policy would be fired without question. Total production of the 421 Super Duty for 1963 came to just 88 engines across all applications, 14 Swiss cheese lightweight Catalinas, a handful of Tempest compacts, some steel-bodied cars, and development vehicles. Numbers get a little fuzzy this far back. You'll sometimes see people say 80, but the surviving door tags and PHS paperwork all point to 88. And here's one more wild detail. One Swiss cheese Catalina was actually completed on April 2, 1963, well after the ban, because it had been ordered internally by Pontiac Engineering under the label of research. That car became the very last Super Duty Pontiac ever built. So what happened to the 14 cars? Well, they got raced hard. That was the whole point. Over the following decades, some were chopped up and converted into altered wheelbase cars, traded around for as little as $1,500, and from what I've been able to find, a couple of them sat in farmers' barns for years before anyone realized what they were sitting on. Today, about 9 Swiss cheese Catalinas are known to still exist, and all of them have either been fully restored or are in the process. In terms of value, we're firmly in $500,000 territory. Hagerty lists examples in good condition around $292,000, but at the big collector auctions, these cars have pushed well past $500,000. That's a long way from the $1,500 trade-in some of them saw in the 1970s. But maybe the most interesting part of this story is what happened because the Swiss cheese got killed. With Pontiac officially locked out of racing, John DeLorean and his engineers figured that if they couldn't take performance to the track, they'd bring it to the street instead. GM had a corporate rule limiting cars to 10 pounds of vehicle weight per cubic inch of engine displacement, but DeLorean realized the rule only applied to base engines, not option packages. That loophole led directly to the 1964 Pontiac GTO, which most people consider the car that kicked off the entire muscle car era. So, in a very real way, the Swiss cheese Catalina is the car that, by getting killed, accidentally gave birth to something much bigger than itself. But that does wrap up the full story of the 1963 Pontiac Swiss cheese Catalina, the car GM built, gave away for free, and then banned in the very same year. Let me know in the comments down below if any of you have ever seen one of these in person, because I've only ever seen them in photos, and honestly, I'd settle for just getting to look underneath the frame on one of these things. I'd also be curious to know what you think. Was it worth it, drilling 120 holes into a frame to shave a few tenths off the quarter mile? Please make sure to like, share, and subscribe. It really helps me out. And I will see you all in the next one, enthusiasts.